My house in Dearbornne doesn't stand out from the others on Benson Street, a typical one-story house with chipped paint and a creaky porch. I've lived here for 38 years, the last 11 of which have been alone since Robert passed away. Sometimes I think that part of my life died with him, the part where I was respected and my opinion counted. My name is Violet Hampton, I'm 67, and I'm a former elementary school teacher. I worked in schools for 32 years, saw children grow up, become parents, and bring their children into my classroom. I thought that after retirement I could finally enjoy life with my family, but fate has decreed otherwise. Today is Thursday, the day Orlando and his family usually come over for dinner. I start cooking first thing in the morning, the roast he's loved since he was a kid. Truth be told, I'm not sure he still loves it. I just don't know what else he likes. We hardly ever have heart-to-heart talks, despite our weekly dinners. The knock on the door comes half an hour after the appointed time. It's a regular thing for them. "Hi, Mom." Orlando kisses me on the cheek. He smells like cigarettes, even though he swore he quit 3 years ago. His wife Paige nods without looking up from her phone. Their daughters, my granddaughters, Carly and Trixie, ages 13 and 10, don't even say hello walking past me toward the TV. "Girls, say hello to Grandma," I say, trying to add more enthusiasm to my voice than I actually feel. "Hi," they mutter in unison, not looking up. Paige finally gets off the phone. You know how they are at that age. Teenagers. Orlando works as a water specialist for the Dearbornne Municipal Utilities Company. He's proud to say he provides clean water for the city, but all he talks about at the table is how he's underappreciated, how his bosses don't see his potential, how his coworkers try to take credit for his work. Paige works for an insurance company, processing claims, and her stories are even darker, of people trying to cheat the system, of accidents and disasters. We sit at the table I've set with their favorite tablecloth, eating from the china I save for such occasions. The conversation, as usual, doesn't flow. "How are the girls doing in school?" I ask, trying to break the silence. "Normal," Orlando answers, pouring himself a second portion. "Listen, Mom, can you lend us some money? Paige's car broke down and needs the transmission replaced. Oh, here it is. I knew this was coming. Every visit ends with a request for money. It's not that they're poor, they both have stable jobs, a house bigger than mine, 2 cars. But somehow they're always short of money. How much do you need?" I ask, although I already know that I will give them as much as they ask for. 2,000, he says, as if by the way. "We'll pay you back next month." We both know they won't, just like they didn't pay for the roof repair, the new refrigerator, the girls' summer camp. I'm mentally counting my savings. My teacher's pension isn't that big, but I've always been frugal. I have money, but it's getting smaller with each loan. "Okay," I answer. Paige finally looks up from her plate. "Thank you, Violet. You're a lifesaver." After dinner, they pack up quickly. Orlando promises to stop by this weekend to help with the leaky faucet in the bathroom, a promise he's been making for 3 months now. When the door closes behind them, the house is quiet. I wash the dishes, wipe down the table, put the leftovers away in containers. They don't need anything with them. They always have an excuse as to why they can't take with them what I've prepared with so much love. The next day, I go to the bank and withdraw $2,000. The clerk looks at me with slight concern, an elderly woman withdrawing a large sum of cash. I'm used to these looks. I wire the money to Orlando's account. He doesn't even call to thank me, just sends a quick text. "Got it. Thanks." A week goes by. The faucet in the bathroom is still leaking. I call a plumber, paying him $80 for 10 minutes of work. When Orlando finally shows up on Saturday without Paige and the girls and sees the faucet fixed, he shrugs. Well, one less problem. He's come for a reason. Turns out they need money for a new couch. "The old one is worn out and Paige has a bad back," he explains, looking around my living room. "By the way, yours isn't exactly brand new either." "I'm fine," I said. "I don't have any more money. I just paid for my house and car insurance." Orlando's face darkens. His visit ends faster than usual. The next time they visit is 2 weeks later. Paige brings pictures of the new couch, a beautiful leather one. Apparently, they found the money without my help. I'm happy for them, but I can't help but notice that this is the first time in a long time they've brought pictures of anything in their house. I haven't seen pictures of my granddaughters, their school accomplishments, or trips in years. Grandma, can I take these books? Carly asks, pointing to a shelf of my favorite detectives. Sure, honey, I reply, glad she's shown interest in something in my house. She has to go to school, a project, Paige said, keeping her eyes on the phone. A month later, I find out by chance that the books were sold at a garage sale. Orlando says it's a misunderstanding, that the girls didn't realize their value. But I know that's not the case. It's just that nothing of mine has value in their eyes. December comes unnoticed. Snow falls outside the window. Neighbors decorate their houses with garlands and set up inflatable Santa Clauses in their yards. I pull out my humble decorations, hang a wreath on the door, and place a small artificial Christmas tree on the table by the window. Robert has always insisted on a real Christmas tree, but I'm the only one who finds it unnecessary. The phone rings. It's Brianna, an old friend of mine from Chicago. We went to college together, then worked at the same school until she moved to the big city. We keep in touch, but we don't see each other much. Violet, honey, how are you? Her voice is as sonorous as it was 50 years ago. Same old, Bree, I answer, smiling for the first time all day. Listen, I have an idea. Why don't you come visit me for Christmas? I'll get you a ticket, it'll be my gift to you. The thought of Christmas not in an empty house, not waiting for my son's family to stop by for half an hour between their chores, seems almost unrealistic. I don't know, Bree. Orlando and the girls. Orlando and the girls will live without you for a few days, she interrupts. When was the last time you did something for yourself, I wonder? Really, when? Even trips to the store I plan so that I can be home in case Orlando calls or stops by. Although he never just calls or stops by for no reason. Okay, I finally say, but I'll buy the ticket myself. Brianna laughs. That's my Violet. Stubborn as ever. We agree that I'll fly in on December 21st and stay until the 27th. 6 days away from Dearbornne, the empty house, the heavy thoughts. Next Thursday, dinner. I decide to make my plans known. I'm going away for Christmas, I say, as Orlando finishes his story about the coworker who stole his idea for a better filtration system. Where? He asks, clearly surprised. To Chicago, to see Brianna. Remember her? You met her at Dad's funeral. The weird lady with the purple hair? Paige wrinkles her nose. She had purple strands, I correct her. She always liked to experiment. So when are you leaving? Orlando looks disgruntled. The 21st. I'll be back on the 27th. But we always spend Christmas together, he says in that tone you use with a cranky child. I try to remember the last time we really spent Christmas together. Last year, they stopped by for an hour in the afternoon and left without unwrapping the presents I had prepared for them. The year before, Orlando was sick and I was left alone. Before that, they'd gone to Paige's parents' house. This year will be different, I say softly. I want to see Brianna. It's been so long since we've seen each other. What about us? Paige finally gets off the phone. We were counting on your specialty turkey pot pie. I know that's not true. I know they were planning to spend Christmas at Paige's parents' house, like they've been doing for the past few years. But I'm not arguing. I'll leave you a pie before I leave, I promise. You'll just warm it up. Orlando frowns. It's not the same. And then, are you sure you should be flying alone at your age? At my age. It's the phrase he uses when he wants to remind me that I'm old and helpless, even though I'm perfectly capable of handling myself in the house, driving a car, and even tutoring the neighbor's kids part-time. I'll do just fine, I reply. It's only an hour-and-a-half flight. The rest of the evening is spent in a tense atmosphere. Orlando barely speaks, Paige is engrossed in her phone, and the girls watch TV in the living room. When they leave, I notice that no one even says a real goodbye. The next day, Orlando calls. Mom, I've been thinking, maybe you should stay after all. The girls are so upset they're not going to see you for Christmas. I can hear the falseness in his voice. I don't think the girls will even notice I'm gone. I already bought the tickets, Orlando, and Brianna's waiting for me. All right, his tone turns cold. Do as you please. I know he's not mad because he won't see me for the holidays. He's angry because I've made a decision without considering his opinion for the first time in a long time, because I'm slipping out of his control. In the last few days before I leave, I feel an unusual excitement. I buy a new travel bag, pull my best dress out of the closet. Order a small gift for Brianna online, a snowflake brooch that I think will go with her eccentric style. Orlando doesn't call for a few days, apparently still resentful. When he finally calls, his voice sounds strangely strained. So you're still going? Yes, of course, I answer. The tickets are bought and Brianna's waiting. I see. He sighs. Well, have a good trip. No, have a good vacation. Or say hi to Brianna. Just a formal goodbye. I'm used to this attitude by now, but it still hurts every time. The day before I leave, I start making the promised pie. Turkey, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, just the way Orlando likes it, or rather the way he liked it when he was a kid. I'm not sure his tastes haven't changed. We so rarely have real conversations. I decide to call again to see if they'll pick up the pie or if I should leave it on the porch for the neighbors to pass around. Hello? Paige's voice sounds annoyed. Hey, Paige, it's Violet. Is Orlando home? He's in the shower. Is there an emergency? No, I just wanted to see if I could give you the pie I promised you. Pause. What kind of pie? The Christmas turkey pie. I promised to leave it for you before I left. Oh, that one. Don't worry, Violet. We're going to my parents for the holidays, and they've already made it. I'm not surprised, but I still feel a pang of disappointment. So no one was counting on my pie. It was just another manipulative remark. Oh, I see. Then I guess I'll just give it to the neighbors. Whatever you say, Paige replies indifferently. I hang up the phone and stare at the half-cooked pie. I think about throwing it away but decide to finish it and actually take it to the neighbors. The Youngs across the street, or maybe the Cranstons, who have 5 kids and always run out of money for the holiday table. Brianna calls in the evening. I'm so excited, Vi. I can't wait to see you. Her enthusiasm is contagious, and I start smiling too. Me too, Bri. This is going to be the best Christmas I've had in a long time. You have no idea how many things I have planned. We'll go to the Christmas fair, the light show in the park, maybe even the theater. Just you and me, just like old times. We chat for another hour, reminiscing about the past, making plans for the week ahead. When I hang up the phone, I feel light at heart, as I haven't felt in years. The day I leave, I take the pie to the Cranstons. Linda, the mother of the family, is almost weeping with gratitude. I feel like I made the right choice. I return home, check that everything is off, that the windows are closed. I grab my bag and call a cab to the airport. At the last moment, I look back at the house. Small, cozy, but so empty and quiet. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel sad to leave it, only the anticipation of new experiences and the joy of meeting an old friend. O'Hare Airport met me with bright lights and crowds of people rushing to the Christmas festivities. I clutched the handle of my new travel bag, looking for Brianna in the crowd. Suddenly, I saw her, with a huge "Welcome Violet" banner in her hands. Her hair had turned completely gray, but the bright green strand still stood out even from a distance. Vi! She shouted when she saw me and waved her hand so vigorously that she almost knocked the hat off a man walking by. We hugged, and I felt the tension of the last few weeks begin to let go. Brianna smelled like her favorite perfume, the same perfume she'd smelled 50 years ago. You look amazing, she said, pulling away and looking at me. You're a good liar, too, I laughed. I never lie, she winked. Except sometimes I embellish. Come on, the cab's waiting. We loaded my bag into the trunk and drove through the snowy city. Chicago was glowing with Christmas lights, garlands, wreaths, and Christmas trees in store windows. Christmas songs were playing on the radio. How was the flight? Brianna asked. It was fast. Before I knew it, we had landed. And your son? How did he react when you left? I sighed. The usual. First he tried to convince me to stay, then he took offense. Said they were counting on my Christmas pie when they were really going to Paige's parents' house. Brianna shook her head. Still the same then. You know, I still remember him throwing a tantrum as a kid because you didn't buy him that video game. How old was he? 10 years old? 12, I smiled. Robert said he was spoiled, and I said he was just an emotional kid. Who was right? We both knew the answer. Brianna's apartment was in an old brick house near Lake Michigan, small but cozy, filled with books, paintings, and souvenirs from her many travels. Welcome to my humble abode, she said as she opened the door. In the living room stood a huge Christmas tree, almost touching the ceiling. decorated with toys that seemed to have been collected over decades. You still collect Christmas tree toys, I remarked, smiling. Of course I do. It's a tradition, she winked. And I have something special for you. Brianna pulled out a small box and held it out to me. Inside was a crystal snowflake engraved with our initials. Merry Christmas, Vi, she said quietly. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't remember the last time I'd gotten a gift chosen with such care. I have a present for you too, but it's not as pretty, I mumbled, rummaging through my bag. Oh, come on, I'm sure it's beautiful. I handed her a small box with a snowflake brooch. Oh my God, we think alike. She laughed as she opened the gift. These are twin snowflakes. Great minds think alike, I smiled. Brianna immediately pinned the brooch to her sweater. Perfect. Now let's hang your snowflake on the tree and I'll show you your room. The guest bedroom was small but cozy, with a large window overlooking the snowy park. On the bedside table was a picture of Brianna and me at our college graduation, young, with bright smiles and hopes for the future. You kept it, I said, taking the frame in my hands. Of course I did. It's one of my happiest memories. We were silent for a while, each in her own thoughts. You must be tired from the road, Brianna said finally. Rest, and then we'll have dinner. I made your favorite lasagna. Do you remember what my favorite lasagna is? Of course I do. Eggplant and ricotta, like that Italian place we went to in college. I was touched. Orlando never remembered what I liked or didn't like. Sometimes I felt like he didn't even think about it. After a short rest, we had dinner and Brianna was right. The lasagna was just the way I liked it. We opened the bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion and talked late into the night, reminiscing about our college years, our schoolwork, the trips we'd taken together before our paths diverged. Remember when we hitchhiked to New York? Brianna laughed. I bet your parents freaked out when they found out. Yours didn't find out at all. You told them we were on a college tour? They wouldn't have understood. I've always been the right girl for them. Not to me. I knew how adventurous you really were. We laughed till we cried, reminiscing about our follies, and I suddenly realized I hadn't laughed like that in years. The next day, Brianna showed me around Chicago. We walked along the Lake Michigan waterfront, went into small stores, drank hot chocolate in a cozy coffee shop. She introduced me to her friends as vibrant and energetic as herself. Esther, an artist who painted amazing cityscapes. Lawrence, a retired man who moonlights as a museum guide. And Gina, the owner of a bookstore specializing in rare editions. They all welcomed me as warmly as if they'd known me all my life. No one looked at me as if I were an old woman. No one spoke to me in a condescending tone, as Orlando often did. Here I was, just Violet, Brianna's friend, and that was enough. In the evening, we went to the Christmas fair. The square was filled with stalls with souvenirs, hot drinks, and sweets. Music was playing, kids were riding the carousel, garlands twinkling everywhere. We bought gingerbread, hot cider, and just wandered around, soaking up the atmosphere of the approaching holiday. I'm so glad you came, Vi, Brianna said as we sat on a bench watching people skating on the ice. I missed you. I missed you too, I replied. I don't know why we don't see each other that much. Because life, it tends to throw us into a whirlwind of everyday life, and we forget what's important. I thought about my life in Dearbornne, the empty house, the endless waiting for my son's calls or visits, which were always disappointing. About how slowly time drags on when each day is like the one before it. The next days flew by like one happy dream. We visited another museum, a theater, walked around the festive city. In the evenings, we cooked dinner, watched old movies, or just talked. I hardly thought about Dearbornne at all. On the third day of my stay, as we were returning from the art museum, my phone rang. Orlando's number. I'm sorry, I said to Brianna. It's Orlando. Sure, answer it. She nodded, but I noticed her gaze become wary. Hello? Hi, Mom. Orlando's voice sounded unusually cheerful. How are you doing? How's Chicago? I'm fine, thanks. Brianna and I went to the museum today. That's great. Listen, I have some news. Remember I was talking about the new water treatment technology we're trying to implement? Well, there's a conference in Chicago tomorrow, and they're sending me there. You're coming to Chicago? I couldn't hide my surprise. Yeah, I'll be there until Christmas, And you know what? I thought I'd pick you up at the airport and we could go back to Dearbornne for the holidays. You're leaving on the 27th, right? I was stunned. Orlando had never shown such concern. Yes, the 27th, but I thought you were going to Paige's parents? There was a change of plans. They decided to go on a cruise, so we'll be home and it'll be nice to spend Christmas together. What do you say? I didn't know what to say. On the one hand, the offer was tempting. We don't have to worry about cabs to the airport, and it's really been a long time since we've spent Christmas as a family. On the other, something about this sudden show of concern alarmed me. That's very sweet of you, Orlando, but I don't want you to come to the airport on purpose for me. I'm sure you'll have a lot to do at the conference. No, that's not a problem. The conference ends on the 26th. I'm leaving on the 27th anyway. I'll just pick you up before my flight and we'll go together. I hesitated. Something in Orlando's voice, in his insistence, made me hesitate. But maybe I was just used to waiting for a catch. Okay, I said finally. Thank you. That would be convenient. Great. Then it's a deal. I'll call you when I know the exact time. Say hi to your friend. I went back to the table. Brianna looked at me questioningly. Orlando's coming to Chicago for a conference on water treatment, I explained. He offered to pick me up from the airport on the 27th so we could go back to Dearborn together. Brianna frowned. And you said yes? Yes. Why not? It would be more convenient. She took a sip of wine, obviously choosing her words. Vi, I don't want to intrude, but are you sure you can trust him? I sighed. Of course I understood her concern. I'd told her enough stories over the days about Orlando letting me down. I know what you're thinking, but it's just a trip to the airport. What could possibly go wrong? A lot of things, Brianna mumbled. He might be late. He might not show up at all. He might forget. He might just change his mind. But he offered. Why would he offer if he wasn't going to come? Brianna shrugged. I don't know. Maybe he thinks it's a good idea now. And then something more important will come up. Or maybe he'll just forget. You said yourself that he's unreliable. I felt a pang of irritation. Brianna was right, but I didn't want to admit it. Somewhere deep inside, I hoped that this time would be different. I'll give him a chance, I said firmly. After all, he is my son. Brianna gently covered my hand with hers. Of course, Vi. You know him better than that. Just be prepared for things not to go as planned, and know that my door is always open to you no matter what happens. I nodded, grateful for her understanding. We changed the subject and spent the rest of lunch talking about the next day's plans. But thoughts of Orlando's call never left me. In the evening, lying in bed, I replayed our conversation over and over in my head. Something in his voice, in his words, made me vaguely uneasy. Orlando wasn't usually this attentive. He didn't usually offer his help, didn't show concern. Maybe Brianna was right and I shouldn't count on him. Maybe I should order a cab to the airport right away so I wouldn't be disappointed. But another part of me, the part that always hoped for the best, that always looked for excuses for my son's behavior, whispered, what if this time it will be different? What if he really has changed? I fell asleep with these thoughts without making a final decision. I arrived at the airport 2 hours before I was due to meet Orlando, as I always did. Punctuality had been a lifelong trait of mine, one that Robert valued so much. That's what you're all about, Violet, he said with a smile. Always 20 minutes early. O'Hare Airport was bustling with life. Tourists returning home after the holidays, businessmen rushing to their first post-Christmas meetings, families with children lugging suitcases and gifts. I found a vacant seat by a large window in the waiting area, where the entrance was clearly visible, and settled down there, putting my bag next to me. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. We'd agreed to meet at 12, so I had plenty of time. I pulled out the book Brianna had given me as a parting gift, a novel we'd both loved when we were younger, and immersed myself in reading. At 11:30, I started glancing at my watch. There was still half an hour until the meeting, but I was already feeling a slight uneasiness. Orlando was never on time. Even at his own wedding, he'd been 40 minutes late, keeping all the guests and the bride waiting. But this time should be different, because he himself has a 3 o'clock flight. He can't afford to be late. 12 o'clock. I closed the book and began to stare intently at the people entering the terminal. The crowd was dense, and I was afraid I'd miss Orlando. I had my phone at the ready to call him in case we missed each other. 12 o'clock, 15 minutes. A slight uneasiness was starting to turn into anxiety. I decided to call. It rang. Long, monotonous. No one answered. He must be on the road, I thought. Probably can't hear the call because of the noise. I kept waiting, dialing his number periodically. 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. By this time I was pacing back and forth nervously, unable to keep still. I called for the sixth time, still no answer. I sent a message. I'm waiting for you at the terminal entrance. Where are you? There was no answer. At 1:30, I decided to go to the information desk. Maybe he's waiting for me somewhere else? Maybe we had misunderstood each other. Excuse me, I said to the young woman behind the counter. My son was supposed to meet me here at 12 o'clock, but he's still not here. He's on his own flight at 3 o'clock. Could you announce over the speakerphone that Violet Hampton is waiting for him at the information desk? The woman nodded with an understanding smile. Of course, ma'am. What's your son's name? Orlando Hampton. She made the announcement, and I began to wait again. 15 minutes passed. No one came forward. I called again. No answer. I sent another message. Orlando, I'm worried. Please pick up. I'm at the information desk. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Anxiety had turned to real fear. What if something had happened to him? What if he had an accident on the way to the airport? The snowfall could have made the roads slippery. Or maybe he got sick. A sudden bout of the flu? The news said the flu was particularly severe this season. I tried calling Paige, but she wasn't picking up either. This was getting weird. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Orlando flight time. If he hadn't shown up by now, he wouldn't. He was supposed to be boarding. But why hadn't he called? No warning? Had he simply forgotten about me? I began to think of other times Orlando had let me down. Carly's 8th birthday party, to which I'd been invited and then forgot to tell him that the celebration had been moved to another day. My 70th birthday party, which they promised to celebrate at a restaurant but canceled at the last minute due to Orlando's work emergency. The time I was hospitalized with pneumonia and my son didn't visit me until the 4th day, explaining that he was very busy. Every time, I made excuses. Each time I told myself that he didn't do it on purpose, that he really had important things to do, that I shouldn't demand so much attention. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I kept calling, no longer hoping for an answer, but simply because I didn't know what else to do. My phone showed 23 unanswered calls to Orlando. By 5 p.m., I was exhausted physically and emotionally. My legs were buzzing from standing for so long. My back ached. But most of all, my heart ached. Not from fear. I was almost certain Orlando was okay, but from the bitter realization that I'd just been abandoned. Left alone at the airport, not even bothering to call and warn me. At 6 o'clock in the evening, I found a cafe, ordered tea and a sandwich. I hadn't eaten since this morning, but I couldn't get a bite down my throat. The waitress, noticing my condition, asked if I was all right. Yes, I lied. It was just a delayed flight. She nodded sympathetically, and I felt unexpected tears well up in my eyes. I turned away so she wouldn't notice. 7 o'clock at night. I called again, the 30th ring. Oddly enough, this time Orlando answered. His voice sounded strained. Hello? Mom? Orlando? I almost screamed with relief. Where are you? I've been waiting for you since 12 o'clock. Pause. I'm sorry, Mom. I couldn't make it. What do you mean you couldn't make it? Why didn't you call? I was worried sick. I was in a meeting. I couldn't talk. And then, there was a problem. Yeah, I missed my flight. There was something insincere in his voice, something that made me wary. What kind of trouble? And why couldn't you text me? I sent you a dozen. My phone ran out of battery, he answered quickly. Look, Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I feel awful. But you can take a cab to Brianna's hotel and I'll fly in tomorrow, okay? On the first flight out. Something in his tone didn't match his words. He didn't sound guilty. He sounded more like annoyed, like I was to blame for what happened. Orlando, I don't understand. You say you missed your flight, but you're going to be here tomorrow? If you're in Chicago, why don't you just get here now? Long pause. Yeah, I already left town. The conference is over and Wait, I interrupted him. You said you missed your flight, and now you're saying you left town. What's going on, Orlando? Mom, you got it all wrong. Yeah, that's when I heard Paige's voice in the background. Who's that? Oh, is that your mother? Let me talk to her. A rustle, and then Paige is on the line. Violet? It's Paige. Look, I don't know what Orlando told you, but he didn't go anywhere. He's been home all day, and there was no conference. He made it up. I froze, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. What? He didn't want you to stay at your friend's house for Christmas, Paige continued irritably. He thought you should be home. But instead of just telling you that, he made up the whole conference and airport pickup thing. I told him it was stupid, but he never listens to me. I could hear Orlando yelling something in the background, trying to take the phone away. Paige, stop it! Give me the phone! No, Orlando. I've had enough of your lies, she yelled back and then turned to me again. Violet, he was never going to go to the airport. It was his way of punishing you for going to Chicago against his will. He thought if you stayed there long enough, you'd realize you should have listened to him. Pathetic, I know. There was the sound of a struggle, and the connection broke. I sat staring at the phone in my hand, unable to believe what I had just heard. Orlando hadn't just forgotten or been late. He'd set this whole thing up on purpose. Made me wait 10 hours at the airport, ignored my calls and texts, all to teach me a lesson. My first emotion was disbelief. This couldn't be true. My son couldn't have been that cruel. Then came anger. A wave of rage like I had never felt in my life. How dare he? How could he do that to his own mother? And then the pain, the deep, all-consuming pain of betrayal. The realization that my own son, whom I raised, to whom I gave so much love, care, time, money, had deliberately hurt me. Not just let me down, as he had so many times before, but deliberately planned this whole humiliation. The phone in my hand rang again. Orlando. I didn't answer it. He called again, and then another. Then he started texting. Mom, that's not what Paige said. She's got it all wrong. Please pick up. I can explain everything. I didn't answer. Something inside me broke the part of me that always forgave, always found excuses, always gave another chance. That part had died, and in its place was nothing but emptiness. 8 o'clock at night. I was still sitting in the cafe, not knowing what to do next. My return ticket was for tomorrow. Back to Brianna? But she'd left for her sister's right after she walked me to the airport and wouldn't be back until 3 days later. Get a hotel room? That was probably the smartest option. But before I did, I decided to call again. Not Orlando. I wasn't ready to talk to him. Paige, I wanted to hear the whole truth. She answered after the second ring. Violet? I could hear the concern in her voice. Paige, I need to know the truth, the whole truth, please. A pause, then a sigh. Orlando never left Dearbornne. There was no water treatment conference. She hesitated. He was angry that you left for Christmas. Said you were supposed to be with your family, not some weird old lady with dyed hair. I clenched my teeth, feeling the anger rising in me again. Go on. He made up that conference story to get you to come back early. And when you decided to stay until the 27th anyway, he said he'd teach you a lesson, that you'd learn the importance of family after you'd spent a few hours at the airport. What about you? Did you know that? She was quiet for a moment. Not right away. He told me you had a change of plans and decided to come back early. I only found out the truth today when he sat at home all day, ignoring your calls. We had a big fight about it. I didn't know whether to believe her or not. Paige had never been particularly nice to me, but she wasn't exactly cruel. More like indifferent. Thank you for your honesty, I said finally. Violet, I'm sorry. I really am. What Orlando did was wrong. I'd like to say that he's not always like that, but she didn't finish the sentence. We both knew the truth. Orlando had always been like that. Selfish, manipulative, self-centered. I've just been able to overlook it in the past. What are you going to do now? Paige asked after a pause. That's a good question. What am I going to do? Go back to Dearbornne like nothing happened? Continue this game of family that stopped being real a long time ago? I don't know, I answered honestly. Certainly not what Orlando expects me to do. We said our goodbyes. I sat in the cafe looking at the snow falling outside the window and thinking about my life. About the years I'd spent trying to earn the love of a son who seemed incapable of loving anyone but himself. About the money I gave him, denying myself everything. About the time I spent waiting for his calls and visits, always adjusting to his schedule. I remembered Robert telling me before he died, Vi, don't let him use you. You deserve better. I didn't realize what he meant at the time. Or maybe I didn't want to. 9 o'clock at night? 10 o'clock? I was still sitting in the airport, unable to bring myself to leave. The phone had long since gone silent. Apparently, Orlando realized I wasn't going to answer it. At some point, the same waitress who had served me earlier approached me. Ma'am, you've been here a long time. Are you sure you're all right? She sounded genuinely concerned. I looked at her, young, beautiful, with her whole life ahead of her, and suddenly felt a strange relief. It was as if a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had suddenly fallen from my shoulders. You know, I said with a smile, for the first time in a long time, I'm really okay. And it was true. 10 hours of waiting at the airport, 45 unanswered calls, and one confession from my daughter-in-law is what it took for me to finally see the truth. My son didn't love me, probably never had. And no amount of money, time, or forgiveness could change that. Now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge. But one thing I knew for sure, there was no turning back. I left the airport at almost 11 o'clock in the evening. The waitress at the cafe helped me hail a cab and even wrote the names of several cheap hotels nearby on a napkin. Her kindness, the simple human kindness of a stranger, strangely touched me more than anything my son had done in years. Sitting in the back seat of the cab, I looked out over Chicago at night and thought about what to do next. My return ticket was for tomorrow, but the thought of going back to Dearbornne only caused a heaviness in my chest. Back to what? To an empty house? To a son who had just shown me how little I meant to him? Where are we going, ma'am? The cab driver, an older man with a gray mustache and kind eyes, asked. I gave the address of one of the hotels on the list. But then, catching the cabbie's gaze in the rearview mirror, I suddenly changed my mind. You know, I said, let's go to this address. I dictated Brianna's address. Yes, she'd gone to her sister's and wouldn't be back for 3 days. But I had the keys to her apartment. She'd insisted I take them just in case. Who knew it would come so soon? The cabbie nodded and turned toward the neighborhood where Brianna lived. I leaned back in the seat, feeling strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I made a decision thinking only about myself, about what I wanted, not what others expected of me. Brianna's house greeted me with darkness and silence. I turned on the light in the hallway and immediately felt better. This apartment had become more home to me in a short time than my own house in Dearbornne. I unpacked my bag, showered, and got into bed in the guest bedroom. Despite my fatigue and emotional exhaustion, sleep wouldn't come. My mind was reeling with today's events, Paige's words, the long hours waiting at the airport. Near midnight, the phone rang again. Orlando. I didn't answer it. He called again. And then another. Then he started texting. Mom, please pick up. I can explain everything. Paige got it all wrong. I'm worried about you. The last message made me laugh bitterly. Worried? After making me stand for 10 hours at the airport ignoring my calls? No, he wasn't worried about me. He was worried about the consequences for himself. About me finally seeing the real him. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. But sleep still wouldn't come. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and made myself some tea. Not because I was thirsty, but just to keep my hands busy. Sitting at Brianna's kitchen table, I thought about my life. About the decisions that had brought me here. About how I'd allowed my son and his family to use me, forgiving their neglect and outright rudeness time after time. Why? Why did I put up with all of this? Out of love for my son? Yes, of course. But there was another reason, which I was afraid to admit even to myself. Fear of loneliness. Fear of being all alone, without family, without support. Fear that if I lost Orlando, I'd have no one. But wasn't that the irony? I already had no one. What I called family was just an illusion that I desperately maintained by closing my eyes to reality. At dawn, I made a decision. I would not return to Dearbornne tomorrow. I would stay here in Brianna's apartment, wait for her return, and then decide what to do next. With that decision made, I was finally able to sleep. I woke up late, almost noon. Snow was falling outside the window, covering the city in a white blanket. I felt strangely rested despite the sleepless night. It was as if the decision I'd made had lifted a heavy weight off me. I turned on my phone. Notifications of missed calls and messages from Orlando popped up. The last message had been sent only an hour ago. Mom, I called the airline. Your name is not on the passenger list for today's flight. What's going on? Where are you? I didn't answer. Instead, I called the airline and rescheduled my ticket for a later date, a week from today. Then I called Brianna and left a message on her answering machine, explaining the situation and asking if she minded if I stayed at her apartment until she got back. After that, I made myself breakfast, or rather, lunch from the food I'd found in Brianna's refrigerator. A simple scrambled egg and toast had never tasted so good to me. The phone rang a few more times. I continued to ignore the calls. I needed time to gather my thoughts, to decide what I wanted to say to my son, and if I wanted to talk to him at all. But at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the phone rang once again, I decided it was time. I couldn't avoid this conversation forever. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom! Orlando exclaimed with relief. Finally! I almost went crazy with worry. Where are you? I'm in Chicago, I answered, in Brianna's apartment. Brianna's apartment? His voice changed, became tense. But you were supposed to be back today. You had a ticket. I rescheduled the ticket, I said. I've decided to stay here for a while longer. Pause. Mom, look, I know you're upset about yesterday. I understand that, but it's not what you think. Paige exaggerated everything. Enough, Orlando, I interrupted him, my voice harder than ever. No more lies. I know the truth. I know there was no conference. I know you deliberately kept me waiting at the airport. I know it was your punishment for daring me to have a different Christmas than you wanted. Mom, it's not. Let me finish. I interrupted him again. I've been waiting for you for 10 hours, Orlando. 10 hours. I called you 45 times. I was worried. I thought something had happened to you. And the whole time you stayed home and ignored my calls. Do you have any idea what that was like for me? I didn't think you'd wait this long, he mumbled. I thought you'd realize in an hour or two and go back to your friend. His words only made me angrier. So you're admitting that it was intentional? That you purposely didn't show up or answer your phone? There was a long pause. Yes, he finally said. But you have to understand, Mom. You didn't have to go away for Christmas. Christmas is a family holiday. The girls and I wanted to spend it with you. Don't lie, I said coldly. You were going to Paige's parents. You told me that yourself. Plans changed, he answered quickly. When? After you found out I was going to Brianna's? Or after I refused to cancel the trip? I didn't give him time to answer. You know what the sad part is, Orlando? That you can't even be honest with me right now. Even now, when the truth is out, you keep lying. I'm not lying, he exclaimed. Yes, I was foolish yesterday, I admit it. But I did it with the best of intentions. I wanted you to be with us for Christmas. In good faith? I felt a wave of anger rising inside of me. You made your 67-year-old mother stand in an airport for 10 hours, ignored her calls, made her worry to death, all for the best of reasons. You're being dramatic as usual, he said, a touch of irritation in his voice. I apologized. What more do you want? The truth, Orlando. I want the truth. Why did you do it? Why did you do it? Because I don't believe it was because of Christmas. We haven't spent Christmas together in years. He was silent for so long, I was beginning to think the connection had broken. Orlando? I'm here. His voice sounded muffled. I just don't know what you want to hear. The truth. Just the truth. Another long pause. I was angry, he said finally. Angry that you left without my permission, that you put your friend before your family, that you, without your permission? I couldn't believe my ears. Orlando, I'm 67 years old. I don't need your permission to visit a friend. You're my mother, he said stubbornly. You should be with us. To what? So you can stop by for half an hour like last Christmas? So you can take money for another couch or car? So I can sit alone in an empty house waiting for a call that never comes? See, you're turning everything upside down. His voice got louder. We've always taken care of you, always visiting you. And you're always dissatisfied, always complaining. You don't like anything. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. This conversation wasn't going the way I'd planned. But maybe it was for the best. Maybe it was time for full honesty. Tell me honestly, Orlando. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you came over without asking for money or help? When was the last time you took an interest in my life, my feelings, my thoughts? He didn't answer. Exactly, I said quietly. You can't remember because it didn't happen. To you, I'm not a person with my own wants and needs. I am a source of money and services, an ATM that should always be available when you need it. That's not true, but his voice sounded unsure. No? Then why did you call me today? Were you worried about me or that I wouldn't come back and be able to lend you money for next month? That's not fair, he said after a pause. Yes, I did borrow money from you sometimes, but that was because we were having financial difficulties. Everyone has difficulties. I gave you almost all of my savings, Orlando. Money I've been saving all my life. Money that could have given me a secure old age, and not once have you ever paid me back a dime. I was going to, he said quickly, but something always happened. The car broke down, the roof leaked, the girls needed money for school. What about a new couch? I asked. Or that cruise you and Paige took last year? Or the new video game console for the girls? Were those necessary expenses too? He didn't answer, and I realized I'd hit the mark. You know what your father said to me before he died? I continued quietly. He said, "V, don't let him use you. You deserve better." I didn't understand what he meant at the time, or maybe I didn't want to understand, but now I do. Dad didn't say that, Orlando countered, but there was no certainty in his voice. Yes, he did, and he was right. I let you use me because I was afraid to be alone, because I thought I'd have no one without you. But you know what? I already had no one. What I called family was just an illusion. Mom, you're tired. You're upset. You don't know what you're saying. His tone became condescending, almost patronizing. Why don't you come home, get some rest, and we'll discuss this calmly? No, Orlando, I'm not coming home, at least not now. What do you mean you're not coming back? What about the house, the bills? You can't just. I can, I said firmly. I'm an adult and I can make my own decisions, and my decision is to stay here. For how long? There was concern in his voice. I don't know, maybe a week, maybe longer. But, he obviously didn't know what to say. What about money? Do you have money to live there? That's it. My first thought isn't about my well-being, it's about money. Yes, Orlando, I have money. Not a lot, but I have money. The money you didn't get to take from me. That's not fair, he said indignantly. I didn't take money from you. You gave it to me. Because you thought it was necessary. Because I believed your stories of financial hardship. Because you wanted to be a good mom. But that's not going to happen anymore, Orlando. I'm not going to be your ATM anymore. Is that what this is about? His voice got angry. Is it the money? You're mad because you gave me some money. A little? I couldn't believe my ears. Orlando, I've given you almost $60,000 over the last 5 years. Is that a little? He was silent, and I realized he didn't even remember or think about the amount. But it's not about the money, I continued. It's about respect. It's about recognizing me as a person, not as a convenient resource. It's about love, which I haven't gotten from you in a long time, if ever. Are you saying I don't love you? There was genuine surprise in his voice. Of course I love you. You're my mother. Love isn't words, Orlando. It's an action. And your actions say something else. We were silent. I could hear his heavy breathing on the other end of the line. Finally he spoke, and his voice sounded different, colder, more calculating. Okay, Mom, you want to be alone, I understand. Get some rest, get your mind right. But don't forget you have obligations here. The house, the bills, your stuff. You can't just leave it all behind. I'm not going to drop anything, I replied. I'm just taking time out. Time to think. And frankly, you could do the same. What do you mean? Think about your life, Orlando, your relationship with me, with your family, who you are and who you want to be. Because what you did yesterday was not the act of a loving son. It was the act of a cruel, selfish man. You're over-dramatizing it, he said irritably. I did a stupid thing, I admit it, but you're acting like I committed a crime. Maybe not a crime under the law. But you broke my heart, Orlando, and not just yesterday. Every time you forgot my birthday, every time you canceled a visit at the last minute, every time you asked for money, promised to pay me back, and never did, every time you looked right through me without hearing what I was saying. You broke my heart over and over again, and I kept forgiving you because you are my son and I love you. I heard him take a deep breath. Mom, I. I don't know what to say. I didn't realize you felt this way. Of course you didn't. Because you never asked. You never asked me how I felt. That's not true. Ia, enough, Orlando. I was tired of this conversation, of his attempts to justify himself, of his inability or unwillingness to understand. I've said everything I wanted to say. Now I need time. Time away from you, from Dearbornne, from all of this. And then what? There's anxiety in his voice. Will you come back, I wondered. Did I want to go back? To the life I'd led before? To the constant disappointment and neglect? I don't know, I answered honestly. I can't think about it right now. I need time. But home? The house isn't going anywhere, Orlando. It's been there for 38 years and it'll be there for a little while longer. And the money? There it is again. The money. Always money. What money, Orlando? I asked tiredly. Well, if you're gone, who's going to pay for the electricity, the water, the... I paid all the bills before I left. I interrupted him. Everything is paid until the end of the month, and after that, I'll decide when the time comes. But, goodbye, Orlando, I said. I gotta go. Wait, Mom, don't hang up. But I had already pressed the end call button. Then I turned the phone off and put it on the table. I felt empty, but at the same time strangely liberated. Like I'd said out loud what had been building up inside of me for years. As if I'd shed a heavy weight that had been dragging me down. Talking to Orlando confirmed what I already knew deep down. Our relationship was toxic. He saw me not as a mother, not as a person with feelings and desires, but as a convenient resource. A source of money, help, support, whatever he needed. And when I dared to go against his will, he decided to punish me like a naughty child. But I'm not a child. I am a grown woman who has lived a long life. I deserve respect. I deserve love. I deserve better than what I've gotten from my son all these years. And now I finally realize it. I realize that I can and must end this toxic relationship. Not because I didn't love my son, I will always love him no matter what, but because I loved myself enough to not allow myself to be treated that way anymore. It was a painful realization, but also a liberating one, like pulling a sore tooth. It hurts at first, but then relief comes. I walked over to the window and looked out at snow-covered Chicago. The city that had been a stranger to me just a few days ago now seemed like a refuge, a place where I could start over, where I was accepted for who I was, without expectations or demands. Maybe I really won't go back to Dearbornne. Maybe I'll sell the house, buy a small apartment here in Chicago, closer to Brianna and her friends. Maybe I'll start a new life at 67. That thought, so crazy just a few days ago, now seemed not only possible, but right. The only right thing. I resolutely turned away from the window. It was time to move on. It was time to live for myself, not for my son, who had long ago stopped appreciating my sacrifice. Brianna returned 3 days earlier than she'd planned. She called me from her sister right after she heard my message on the answering machine. I'm leaving immediately, she said firmly. I'll be there by tonight. I tried to talk her out of it, assuring her that I was fine, that she could spend the rest of her time with her sister. But Brianna was adamant. You do the same for me, she said simply, and that was the end of the conversation. She arrived around 6 in the evening, when it was already dark outside the window. I met her at the door, and we hugged each other as tightly as if we hadn't seen each other in years rather than a few days. Bye, she whispered. I'm so mad at your son, I can't even put it into words. I smiled weakly. Believe me, I am too. We walked to the kitchen where I made dinner from the food I found in Brianna's refrigerator and cabinets. It was nothing fancy, just pasta with tomato and herb sauce, but Brianna ate 2 servings, praising my cooking. Over dinner, I told her everything in detail, the long hours at the airport, the unanswered phone calls, Paige's confession, my last conversation with Orlando. Brianna listened without interrupting, only occasionally shaking her head or pressing her lips into a thin line when I got to the particularly painful parts. You know what the weirdest thing is? I said when I finished the story. I feel relieved, like I've shed a heavy weight I've been carrying for years. Brianna nodded. It's not weird, Vi. It's normal. You've finally stopped pretending everything's okay when it's not. You've stopped ignoring reality for the sake of a convenient illusion. That's a huge step. But he's my son, I said quietly. Shouldn't I forgive him no matter what he's done? Forgive, yes, Brianna agreed. But don't let him keep treating you like this. Forgiving doesn't mean you have to be a whipping boy. I thought about what she said. All my life I had thought that a mother's love should be unconditional, that I should tolerate everything, forgive everything, accept everything. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe true love is also about setting healthy boundaries, knowing how to say no when you're treated unfairly. What are you going to do next? Brianna asked, interrupting my thoughts. I shrugged. I don't know. My ticket has been rescheduled for next week. But honestly, I don't want to go back to Dearbornne. Not now, maybe not ever. Then don't go back, Brianna said simply. Stay here, as long as you like. I can't overstay my welcome, Bree. You have a life of your own. Nonsense, she said. My apartment is big enough for both of us, and frankly, I enjoy your company. The house has become more livelier since you've been here. I smiled, touched by her words. But still, it's a temporary solution, Bree. I can't stay with you forever. I have a house in Dearbornne, things, obligations. Why don't you sell the house? Brianna suggested, and the thought, which had crossed my mind before, suddenly didn't seem so crazy. Buy something here in Chicago, a little apartment, nothing fancy, just to have a place to live. Move? At my age? I shook my head. That's crazy. Why? Brianna raised her eyebrows. Because you're 67, so what? People start new lives at 80. Why can't you? I couldn't find anything to say. Really, why not? What kept me in Dearborn except habit and a sense of duty to a son who didn't appreciate that duty? Think of it, Brianna went on. Here you have me, my friends who already like you. Museums, theaters, parks, everything you love. And what's in Dearborn? An empty house and a son who only sees you as an ATM machine? Her words were harsh, but fair. And something inside me responded to them. Some part of me that had long been repressed by a sense of duty and fear of change. I'll think about it, I promised. We cleared the table and went into the living room where Brianna had turned on the Christmas lights on the tree. We sat in the semi-darkness, lit only by multicolored lights, and talked about the past, the future, and the possibilities that were still in front of me. Do you know what you could do here in Chicago? Brianna asked. Teach. Not in school, of course, but privately. Tutoring. You were always a great teacher, Vi, and the kids always loved you. Do you think anyone needs a teacher at my age? I grinned. Of course. Experience is what is most valued in a teacher. I know people whose kids need help with reading, writing, basic math. I could hook you up. That thought warmed me. Teaching has always been more than just a job for me. It's been a calling. And the thought of doing something I loved and could do again was appealing. Besides, Brianna continued, there's a retirement group here that meets once a week to read and discuss books. You'd fit in perfectly. And there's a volunteer program at the Children's Hospital, reading stories to children who are undergoing long-term treatment. I've been involved in it for 3 years now. The more Brianna talked, the more real and appealing the idea of moving seemed to me. Life in Chicago seemed full, interesting, full of possibilities. Unlike my existence in Dearborn, where the days blended into a monotonous gray mass, broken only by Orlando's visits, which were more often disappointment than joy. The next morning at breakfast, I said to Brianna, I've decided. I'm going to sell the house and move to Chicago. She smiled but didn't look surprised. I knew you'd make the right decision, Vi. You've always been smarter than me. No, I shook my head. It just took me longer to work up the courage to do it. And you to push me in the right direction. That same day, I called the real estate company in Dearborn and scheduled an appointment with an agent for the following week. Then contacted an attorney to discuss the legal aspects of selling the house and moving. Called her bank to inquire about the status of her accounts and the possibility of transferring them to the Chicago branch. Each call, Each decision made my plan more and more concrete, more real, and with each step, I felt my confidence grow that I was making the right choice. That evening, the phone rang again. Orlando. I hesitated whether I should answer it, but then I decided I should. I wasn't going to avoid him forever. Besides, he was about to find out about my decision. Hello? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom. Orlando's voice sounded different from the last time we'd spoken. Softer, almost ingratiating. How are you? I was worried. I'm fine, thank you, I answered neutrally. Look, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, about what you said, and you're right. I haven't always been a good son. I haven't always appreciated everything you've done for me, and I'm sorry. I really am. I was silent, not knowing what to say. His apology sounded sincere, but something in his tone alarmed me. I hope you can forgive me, he continued, and come home. The girls miss you. We all do. Orlando, I began cautiously. I appreciate your apology. I really do. But I've made a decision. I'm not going back to Dearbornne, at least not to live there. What? What do you mean? I've decided to sell the house and move to Chicago, I said bluntly. I've already contacted a realtor and a lawyer. I'll be back for a little while next week to pack up and get the house ready to sell. Long pause. You can't do that, he finally said, and his voice changed. The softness was gone, giving way to the familiar, irritated tone. It's crazy. You can't just drop everything and move to another city at your age. I can, Orlando, and I will. But, but what about us? What about the girls? What about... You'll be fine, I said firmly. You're adults with a job, a house, a steady income. You'll be fine without me. It's not about that. His voice became almost pleading. It's about family. We're a family, Mom. A family should be together. Family isn't just geographical proximity, Orlando. It's support, respect, love. And frankly, I haven't felt any of those things from you or your family in a long time. That's not fair, he objected. We've always taken care of you, always visited you. When you needed something, I finished for him. Money, help with the kids, advice around the house. But when I needed something, just attention, just respect, you were never there for me. He started to object, but I interrupted him. Orlando, I don't want to argue. My decision has been made. I'm selling the house and moving to Chicago. If you want to keep in touch with me, you can always come visit or call. But I won't live by your rules anymore. What about the money? He suddenly asked, and there it was. The real reason for his concern. You're not going to sell the house and keep all the money, are you? It's my house too. I grew up there. I have a right to... You have no legal right to that house, Orlando, I said calmly. It belongs to me. Your father willed it to me, not you. But that's wrong, he exclaimed. I am his son. I should get... You got more than you deserve from your father and me, I said, and my voice was harsher than I intended. The college we paid for, the down payment on your and Paige's house, the tens of thousands of dollars I'd loaned you over the years. You've gotten enough. You can't do this to me. His voice shook with anger. I am your son, your flesh and blood. You can't just... I can, Orlando, and I will. Not because I don't love you. I will always love you no matter what. It's because I've finally started to love myself, too. Enough not to let you treat me like this anymore. I ended the conversation shortly after, unable to bear his accusations and demands. It hurt me to hear how quickly his apology turned to anger when he realized he was losing control of me and access to my money. But that pain only strengthened my resolve. Over the next few days, I was busy planning my future. Together, Brianna and I looked at apartment listings in Chicago, discussing neighborhoods, prices, and possibilities. I met with Brianna's friends who could help me with tutoring jobs, visited the book club she told me about, and was warmly received by its members. Orlando continued to call every day. Sometimes he was remorseful and tender, assuring me that he missed me and wanted me back. Sometimes angry and demanding, insisting on his right to some of the money from the sale of the house. Sometimes just manipulative, trying to make me feel guilty for abandoning my family. But with each conversation, I became more and more affirmed in my decision. I saw now what I had refused to see for years. My son would not change. To him, I would always be just a resource to be used, not a person to be respected and loved. Paige also called me one day when Orlando was at work. Violet, she said after an awkward greeting, I want to apologize for everything, not just for what happened at the airport, but for all these years. I haven't always been a good daughter-in-law. Thank you, Paige, I replied, surprised by her sincerity. I appreciate it, and I want you to know, she continued, that I support your decision to move. I understand why you're doing it. Orlando, he doesn't always see how his actions affect others. He only thinks about himself. That was the most direct admission of a problem I've ever heard Paige make. And it explained a lot. Maybe their marriage wasn't as perfect as I'd always assumed either. I'm going to miss the girls, I said. I hope you'll let them visit me in Chicago sometime. Of course, she answered quickly. They'd like that, especially Carly. She's always admired you, you know? Your independence, your strength. I was surprised. Carly, my eldest granddaughter, had always seemed so aloof, so disinterested in talking to me. Had she been looking at me with admiration all this time? I didn't know, I said quietly. Yeah, she doesn't show it. Teenagers, you know how they are, Paige said, a smile in her voice. But she talks about you a lot, about how you taught for 32 years, how you traveled with Brianna when you were young, how you always stood your ground. Those words warmed my heart. Maybe not all was lost with my granddaughters. Maybe in time, without the toxic influence of their father, we could build a real relationship. A week later, as planned, I returned to Dearbornne. Brianna insisted on coming with me, for moral support, as she said. We stayed in a small hotel near my house, not wanting to give Orlando the opportunity to pressure me directly. He tried, of course. He came to the house every day while I was packing and meeting with the realtor. He begged me to change my mind, threatened me with lawsuits, accused me of betraying my family. But I remained steadfast. The realtor appraised the house higher than I expected. The Dearbornne real estate market was booming, and my modest house, despite the chipped paint and creaky porch, was worth a decent amount of money. Enough to buy a small but cozy apartment in Chicago and still have enough left over to live on. I selected the things I wanted to take with me: photos, books, a few pieces of furniture that had sentimental value to me. The rest I decided to sell with the house or give to charity. Orlando was furious when he found out that I wasn't going to give him any of the money from the sale of the house, or most of the furniture and belongings. It's not fair, he shouted. I'm entitled to all this stuff. It's my house, too. No, Orlando, I said firmly. This is my house, and these are my things. If you need something, you can ask for it, and I'll consider your request. But I don't have to give you anything. In the end, I agreed to give him a few pieces of furniture he particularly wanted and some family photos and heirlooms. But I kept the bulk of the proceeds from the sale of the house despite his protests. The house was put on the market, and within 2 weeks a buyer showed up, a young family with 2 young children who were excited about the large backyard and proximity to the school. Seeing them plan their life in my old house was both sad and happy. Sad because a whole chapter of my life was ending. Joyful because a new one was beginning. For them and for me. The day the sale papers were signed, Orlando showed up at the realtor's office uninvited. He was still hoping to get me to change my mind, or at least bargain for a bigger share of the money. But when he saw the young family, the happy kids running around the foster room, something changed in his face. They seem like nice people, he said quietly when we were alone for a minute. I think they'll like living there. I think so too, I said, surprised by this sudden change of tone. He hesitated a moment, then said, I still think you're making a mistake leaving. But I hope you'll be happy in Chicago. That was the closest thing to a blessing I could expect from him. And despite everything that had happened between us, I was grateful for that small show of concern. Thank you, Orlando, I said. I hope so too. After signing all the papers and receiving the check, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the last thread tying me to the past had been cut. I was free, free to start a new life on my own terms. Brianna and I returned to Chicago the next day. During my absence, she, with the help of her friends, had found me several apartment options. One I particularly liked was a small but bright apartment in an old brick building similar to the one Brianna lived in, just a few blocks away. The apartment needed some minor repairs, but the foundation was good. High ceilings, hardwood floors, large windows overlooking a quiet tree-lined street. I could immediately imagine how I would arrange the furniture, what curtains I would hang, where I would put the bookshelves. I bought the apartment a week after I returned to Chicago. The money from the sale of the house in Dearbornne more than covered the cost of the purchase and the planned renovations. I put the balance in a bank account as a financial safety cushion and as an inheritance for my granddaughters when the time came. The renovation took almost a month, and during that time, I stayed with Brianna. She and I bonded even more, spending days and evenings together planning my new home, choosing furniture, discussing wall colors and fabrics. It was like being back in my youth, when we dreamed of the future together. Orlando called once a week, but our conversations became shorter and more formal. He was still hurt and angry about my decision, but seemed to be beginning to accept the inevitable. Occasionally, he would pass the phone to the girls, and my conversations with them were surprisingly warm, especially with Carly, who I now knew secretly admired me. Finally, the renovations were finished and I moved into my new apartment. Brianna and her friends helped me set up the furniture, hang pictures, and arrange the books on the shelves. By evening, everything was ready, and we had a small housewarming party, just a dinner for the closest of us. When everyone was gone and I was alone in my new apartment, I went to the window and looked out at Chicago at night. The lights of the city twinkled in the darkness like stars. Somewhere down below, cars drove by, people walked by, life went on. And I was part of that life. A new life that I had chosen for myself. A life where I was not just a mother, a grandmother, a widow, but first and foremost a human being, with my own desires, aspirations, dreams. I felt free. Freedom to make decisions without looking at the expectations of others. Freedom to live the way I want to live, not the way I'm expected to live. Freedom to be myself. And it felt wonderful, like I'd been wearing tight, uncomfortable clothes all my life, and now I'd finally shed them and could breathe. Yes, I was 67. Yes, I was starting over at an age when many people think only of peace and stability. But I felt more alive, more present than I had in years. It was a beginning, the beginning of a new chapter in my life, and I was ready for it.